Good morning, everybody. I am on my way to work, so I thought I'd make a little video here. So Game of Thrones. Oh my gosh, Game of Thrones. If you haven't seen the last episode, please turn this off, because I will probably be talking about spoilers. So if you haven't watched it, you've been warned. Turn off this video. Yeah, Game of Thrones, man. Actually, I liked the last episode. I know there's a lot of fans out there who didn't like the last episode. I did. I think that for the season that we had, they wrapped it up quite nicely. I don't think they could have done it any better in the time that they were given. All the loose ends were tied up. We got to see a little glimpse into what our heroes were going to be doing with their lives. And the game was won. Now, I don't think that Bran, who ended up as king, was the winner of the Game of Thrones. I think that the winner actually was Tyrion, because I really think that the game wasn't being played by the people who were pursuing the throne, even though the people who were pursuing the throne thought they were playing the game. I think that the game was actually played by the powers behind the throne, the people who were pulling the strings, you know, and Tyrion definitely was one of those people. Everyone else who was a string puller ended up dead. Varys, Littlefinger, and so on. The Red Witch, Melisandre. I mean, anybody who was vying for the throne had people who were behind them that were doing things to try to jockey their candidate into position, right? And we saw this over and over throughout the seasons, where people were dying left and right because the person that they wanted to be on the throne either found out that they were doing something bad or whatever. You know, there was a lot of people who ended up dead. Like Littlefinger was jockeying for all different. I mean, he was constantly like changing everything, right? Just through little things that he was whispering in people's ears. Varys was very much the same, and Tyrion was just kind of more open and out about how he was doing it. You know, he would just walk into a room full of people and say a bunch of stuff and change everybody's perception of things. You know, and I think that Tyrion in the end is the winner. I mean, he is the man who essentially brought up Bran to be king, and he's the one who survived. So Tyrion is the winner. I was wondering if Tyrion wasn't going to end up as king, you know, and I think I may have mentioned that in previous videos, that I thought that Tyrion would end up on the throne, but as hand of the king, that's like the perfect position for him. I think it's a job that he'll take very seriously, and where other hands maybe have not, or didn't gel well with their king or queen, so they weren't able to like have any real power. But Tyrion, I think he will, and I think that Bran chose him not only because he wants Tyrion to basically make up for his past mistakes, but because he knows that Tyrion wanted to rule from the sideline. And Bran doesn't want to be king, so he knows that Tyrion really will step up and do the job, because he knows Tyrion's heart. And I think it's great too, because, you know, the Lannisters were so hated, right, by everyone. because they were rich and moneylenders and basically usurpers of the aristocracies in that, at Casterly Rock. So this is going to give the Lannister house, an opportunity to be legitimate, become legitimate and not be seen as usurpers anymore, because Tyrion, if he does a good job, will, and hopefully father's children will, his family will be known from that point forward. And I think that's good. And there's so much that they could do with spin-off series now. Now that the Game of Thrones is over with, and they're talking about doing Blood Moon, which is going to be a prequel to the times when the Night King was made into the Night King and how he was made into being the Night King. And I think that'll be fun and exciting to watch. But there's so much more they could do too as spin-off series. I'd love to see a spin-off series on Arya, like Arya's adventures to, into the Sunset Sea and what she finds there. And I think, from what I understand, there was a character in history, in that world's history, that was a woman who had traveled by boat into the Sunset Sea and had adventures. And I think that Arya is like kind of following in her footsteps. And I'd love to see them find other places with other peoples. Maybe we could see like the origin of the children of the forest and the weirwood trees. Like maybe they were brought over from somewhere else. And I'd also like to see them do like mini series where they touch on different aspects of the history of the Game of Thrones world. Like, where did all these religions come from? How did they start? How did all these, who were the original people of the great houses? What else? What is the origin of the Children of the Forest? I mean, are they a different species? Are they human? And because they used magic, they mutated? There's so much that they could do with this rich story, and the mythos of this story. And I hope that they do stuff like that. That's one of the things I love about the expanded Star Wars universe is, it's such a rich story that all these other stories can branch off from it, and it can make that universe, the Star Wars universe, even richer and stronger and more exciting, because it's spiderwebbing out from this originally rich story. Well, Game of Thrones is the same way. I mean, there's so much richness there that they could spiderweb it out and even give us a fuller picture of what that world is like. And I hope that HBO does that. I hope that they look at what the Star Wars franchise has done, and they think, hey, we could do the same thing. I just hope it doesn't get too overly commercialized, because I have the tendency to feel that Star Wars is getting a little bit too watered down now. We'll see what happens in the final movie of the trilogy here when it comes out this Christmas. But we shall see in The Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, I mean, there's so much good story stuff going on in our world right now, which is great, because our world is kind of crappy. So having these like little island sanctuaries to go to, these stories, is like awesome for decompressing. after seeing like what's going on in the world. Ugh, it's just getting worse and worse, it seems like. It's funny that, you know, I was turning to a story like the Game of Thrones to feel better. Oh, yeah. But what a rich, fun ride that was. Oh my gosh. That was, you know, the last story that like really took me on a ride and just got me all excited was Lost. And it's interesting because like the first time I watched through Lost, when I got to the end, I was like pissed off. I didn't know what the heck the writers were thinking. I was so mad. I went through and I watched it again almost a decade later and was like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. Everything's a distraction. They told us what was going to happen in the first episode. So I kind of approached Game of Thrones in sort of the same way, you know, that I watched the first episode like many, many, many times. And, you know, and actually the first season I watched through several times because I knew that the writers of Games of Thrones was going to tell us everything that we needed to know in the first season. And that everything else after that were going to be side stories and distractions and little lessons in morality for us. Which the whole Daenerys thing was nothing more than a morality play. You know, they got us cheering her on every time she killed a slaver, every time she killed just anybody that we thought of as being evil. We were cheering her on. And then in the end, when she got to King's Landing, you know, we saw the people at King's Landing as innocents, and all of a sudden our hero was turning evil. But she was like it through the whole thing. I mean, she dehumanized people to justify killing them. She dehumanized the slavers to justify killing them. And anybody who stood in her way, she dehumanized, which is exactly what Hitler did when he was like slaughtering millions of people. So, I mean, what she did at King's Landing came as no shock to me, even though it came as a shock to so many people. If you're a lover of history and you saw the parallels right from the start between Daenerys and Hitler, you shouldn't have been surprised at all at what was going on there. I mean, Hitler believed that what he was doing was good. He was doing it for the greater good of all people with German blood. And he too was being cheered on by all the people around him when they thought, hey, he's taking out evil. Hey, he's doing this. Hey, he's doing that. But when it started to go sideways, everybody was like, oh, just horrified at what Hitler had become. He had been that same guy the whole time. It's just that when you are on the same page as somebody when it comes to whether or not you like a certain person or a certain group of people, you can justify and be okay with the evil that they're doing. But the moment they step on you, all of a sudden, oh, they're turning evil. No, they've always been evil. It's just that you're evil too. And I think that that's the lesson that the writers of Game of Thrones was trying to like make us all see. I think that so many people hated the fact that Daenerys was turning evil and going against all these innocent people was because they realized, hey, we've been kind of cheering her on to do this kind of thing the whole time. You know, I think people were feeling a little bit of guilt. But it is what it is, right? It was a great show. I loved it. I loved the ending. They couldn't have done better. Bran was the perfect choice to be king. He's an unemotional. He's not a warrior. See, like, that's another thing. Like, it's first season, we knew everything about Bran that we needed to know. We knew that he wasn't a warrior. I mean, when he was trying to, like, do archery and Arya showed him up, I mean, right away we see he's not a warrior. When they forced him to go and watch Ned Stark behead the guy for the deserter from the Night's Watch, Bran's reaction was one of, you know, obviously he didn't want to ever see anything like that again, you know, which is why I think Bran always kind of like avoided all the conflict at all costs. What else did we learn about Bran? I can't think of anything now. I was thinking about things this morning, but of course now I can't remember what I was thinking. I was thinking about how his innocence was stolen from him very quickly. You know, between watching the guy get beheaded, seeing Jaime and Cersei doing the naughty up in the tower that he got pushed out of, and, you know, ending up as someone who was crippled, all that, like, stole his innocence really fast, right? Like, super fast. He had to grow up quickly or die. And in the same way we saw him fall from the tower in the first episode, we see him rise to the level of king in the last. So it's kind of mirroring. It's like a mirror image of the first episode. And I like too, like, how the last I mean, so much of the Game of Thrones, like, drew inspiration from so many different things, you know, from, you know, Mr. Martin's love of Tolkien, and, you know, you can see a lot of the Lord of the Rings in the show, you know, especially at the end when they're, like, burning the throne. It reminds me of when the one ring to rule them all fell into the lava and melted. That's what I was thinking about when I was watching the throne melt down. It was a lot like that. And I mean, some of the political, you know, the political aspects of the show mirrored, you know, 20th century and 21st century politics. And so, I mean, you could see just where the writers and Mr. Martin, like, drew all of their inspiration from, and I thought that was pretty freaking sweet. And I hope that they continue to do that in the prequels and hopefully spin-off series that they do from this, because that's what made the show smart. And that's what I liked about the show too. I felt like it wasn't insulting my intelligence. Even this last season, which everybody felt so about, I didn't, because I could see that they were just sort of wrapping things up, you know, the whole time. They were wrapping things up and ramping things up for the final episode. And yeah, they had to do it a little. If they would have done 8 episodes instead of 6, I think they would have been able to perfect it. And if they ever do any reshoot, I would like to see them just add a couple more episodes with a little bit more information about things that maybe we would have liked to have found the answers to. But all in all, I liked the last season a lot. My favorite season, though, I think was season 3. But this season wasn't terrible. I don't know why everybody feels like it is. If you felt like this season was terrible, give me some specifics in the comments below so we can talk about it, because I'd like to understand what people's hang-ups were. But anyways, that's all I have to say. I rambled on long enough. Thanks for watching. I love you guys. Mwah. Okay, bye-bye.